As I mentioned earlier, this second message I want to give today, I want you to think for a moment. I want to think for a moment outside of theology regarding this Feast of Tabernacles and the future with the kingdom of God. I want you to stop and think for a moment that if you and I should be so lucky as to be one of those kingdom of priests, how and what would be the message that we would give first time as a servant of God? When we think about it, this is a responsibility. This is a true honor that we would be granted to be able to provide education, development for the future spiritual success of many people, possibly people that you have had run-ins with even today, or people that are just good friends of yours right now that have no idea regarding God's word, God's future, and the plan. But also remember, it may be people that you've never met before in your entire life. And it could be a situation where we have to be very cognizant of the circumstances of their recent past. We have to remember the potential mental state of the survivors of the time of Jacob's trouble, the Great Tribulation, and the time of God's wrath. And those three events are different events. On the Feast of Trumpets, we read through the time of God's wrath with that seventh trumpet. And within that seventh trumpet are seven vials. And this is all long, or before that, rather, I should say, there have been six other seals that have been opened. And the time of God's wrath comes after that. And as you recall, the fifth seal was the Great Tribulation. So it is a time for which there has been carnage, there has been difficulty, of the which we have never seen in this world. I certainly never experienced World War II. I never experienced a concentration camp. My mind really can't grasp what those individuals went through. And then go back far earlier than that, maybe the time of the Vikings, maybe long before that, to the time of Nimrod, all the individuals over the course of time. Think of the people right before the flood. Think of the people right before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. None of that, great tragedies, none of that matches what these individuals would have gone through. The time of Jacob's trouble, the Great Tribulation, and the time of God's wrath on this earth. If you have your Bibles, turn over to Matthew chapter 24. I don't think that Jesus was using hyperbole here. I don't think that he was just trying to make a point, because many of the things that we've seen, the horrific wars that have occurred since the time of Jesus Christ's time on earth as a human, would not have transpired by this time when he gave this message here in verse 21. For then there will be a great tribulation, as such as not has occurred since the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will. And unless those days should be cut short, no life would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. You know, when you think about that, and there's a parallel somewhat of what we have in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, he is saying that nothing from the beginning of the world through his current time, or even until that time when these things have happened, will have ever occurred on that scale. And we've seen over the course of time, whether it was the Spanish Inquisition, whether it was all kinds of difficult times that people have gone through in the course of war and difficulty, nothing has matched what these individuals would have gone through, for which you and I potentially would be giving the care to nurture, to bring up as you have with children, and to be preparing these individuals for the future. That first group is going to be completely shell-shocked, beyond anything that your mind or my mind can really understand when you think about it. Now, granted, there'll be subsequent generations of individuals who probably won't be anywhere near close to that great tragedy. But think about that first group. I dare say we need to be careful with how we may approach that first message with that first group. I don't think they'll be ready for you to start theologing with them. I think there's much more that you and I, just like with children in our family, when we start out young with them, we don't just start slamming them with a bunch of theology. We work with them on their level and what they need. Years ago, there was a very famous song, a pop song done by the group Fun. And Some Nights was the name of it. And it's a really good tune. And I remember when I was watching the music video years ago that the group had assigned that particular song, they utilized the Civil War and how there were certain individuals that they were all about the glory marching out of the town. But when they got into the reality of the war, they began to realize, what am I doing? What is going on? War was a little different than that glorious thing that they went into. And there's a couple of lines of that song that I put here on the screen that I think will be very relevant and germane to that first group that you and I may be given the honor to try to help and to bring forward. But I still wake up. I still see your ghost, O Lord. I'm still not sure what I stand for. What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I do not know. You think about, as the term we have today, the post-traumatic stress disorder that these individuals have gone through. We've seen people, whether it was from the Vietnam War, whether it was from World War II or World War I. The term used in World War I was shell shock, Civil War, and not just in the United States, but all countries for which many wars have gone on. This post-traumatic stress disorder is a type of an anxiety disorder. Now, there are people that have that now with a host of different things, but think about the individuals, again, coming out of the time of Jacob's trouble, the tribulation, and the wrath of God. And you think about post-traumatic stress disorder and how it can occur. Oftentimes, it's after you've seen or experienced a very traumatic event. And it involves the threat of an injury, or in some cases, the death. And no doubt, these individuals would have seen a tremendous amount of death. Death is probably on the scale that hasn't been realized, and there's been a lot of death in the course of time. Some of the symptoms that you have with it is this intrusive memories may occur and be in flashbacks. You have the reliving of the tragic event for minutes or even days at a time, upsetting dreams about that traumatic event. Of course, we've seen stories and read things oftentimes about people coming back from war and they dream things, or they're in the middle of a situation, just normal life, and all of a sudden they go back in time to that very tragic situation. Think about the individuals, again, the time of Jacob's trouble, the great tribulation, and the wrath of God. What these individuals' minds will be like. Now, you can say that God will fix their minds immediately. I don't think that would be the case. I'm speculating here a bit. I do know that there may be some individuals that will have to have that happen, where God would just erase their memory and reformat their mind or whatever. But I think the reality of it is like many people have been called in the church from different situations. Their minds didn't just get erased and wiped clean. And you and I go through tragic events now. Maybe not on the scale, but we go through some tragic events. How many times have you been through something, all of a sudden your mind goes back to when you were a child and something happened? You think about kids that have been abused now, and they get up in age and all of a sudden something happens and their mind goes back to that tragic event. God helps us with what we need, and sometimes it does not involve a wiping of the disk and inputting a new disk. It involves working with someone to bring them out. And that may be the first step that you and I have to work with. You think about, again, some more of these symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, this whole idea of avoidance and emotional numbingness. They don't want to talk about it. And yet we know in some cases there needs to be a discussion. But how do you reach somebody who doesn't want to talk anymore? They don't want to think about it. How do you reach someone when they're emotionally numb and they've seen, the flesh come off of an individual? How do you teach them Again, I don't think you're going to start theologizing with them and beating them over the head with doctrine. I don't think that's the approach. You know, people have difficulty with memories. They have problems with trouble concentrating. They have problems even maintaining a close relationship. And yet at this time, you're assigned to have a close relationship with somebody who wants to avoid you. How are you going to respond? How am I going to respond? These are some real world things for you and I to think about for the future. And, you know, I'm sure there's many more things when you think of that are available as far as resources with post-traumatic stress disorder. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Some of the symptoms that go along with this anxiety and this emotional exaggeration or irritability and anger. Can you handle someone lashing back out at you when you're trying to help them? Well, I can tell you one thing. If you've had teenagers, you can know, but they're probably nothing like the level of what they were talking about here. That's just a very small amount of having the same types of things. The overwhelming guilt and shame that some of these people may have. Their just self-destructive behavior they may have. They may try to turn to some kind of form of alcoholism. Not being able to sleep at night. You talk about somebody that has sleep deprivation, how it affects the mind. It affects the mind of all of us when we have sleep deprivation. But maybe you can't sleep because you keep having these flashbacks, because you experienced the time of Jacob's trouble. Maybe they experienced the time of the Great Tribulation. And maybe they were part of some of the things that went on during that Great Tribulation, and they executed a lot of bad people, or bad things on people, I should say. And then they had a lot of bad things happen to them through the wrath of God. You know, this whole thing can lead to a lot of concern that you and I need to think about of how we would approach that first message. I think one place for us to start is with Jesus in Matthew 9. In Matthew 9, verse 36, if you have your Bibles while we're here, just turn over there. What did Jesus do when he looked at individuals? What was his approach? Seeing the people, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. Think about that for a moment. He felt great compassion for these individuals because they were distressed and they were very dispirited. I dare say that in the future, there will be a tremendous amount of dispiritedness and distress. And your first message is going to be how to reach these people, potentially. Matthew chapter 15, another example of Jesus. Matthew chapter 15, and we'll look at verse 32. And Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I feel compassion for the people. This was healing great crowds of people. I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me and now 3 days have nothing to eat. And I don't want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way. You know, after these healings and these people would come, masses of people, and he would heal a lot of different conditions, as we saw earlier, but he didn't heal every single person. But even the people that came to him, he felt compassion for them. I think you see a common thread here of compassion. And the question is, do you have compassion for people? What's going to be our approach? How do we handle things even today? Let's turn over to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter 3. I dare say that if we can't begin to get it right, and I say begin now, because I do think that we will have to go through a whole format change in our minds to be able to have this responsibility. But if we can't even begin to have a little bit of it now, how will we possibly be able to do this in the future? With people even in the church, much less even people in society. What's your approach now with people? Are you hard-hearted like the Pharisees? Here in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, it says, to sum up all of you, be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit. not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. Think about that for a moment. Does harmonious come close to describing you? Does sympathetic come close to describing you and me? Does brotherliness come close to describing you and me? Does kind-heartedness come close, and humility come close now? You know, I don't think that these are things that we should just pass off. I think these are things that we should be very, very cognizant of. And I think compassion is where it starts. It doesn't start with doctrine and theology. It starts with having compassion and trying to understand and being able to understand how you approach people on that first message as a servant of God who have gone through significant difficulties in a very horrific time for which nothing that has ever occurred in the current history of man will have come close to matching based on Jesus' own words. You know, when you ask this question of what would be your first message, where would you begin? How would you begin the process? I have just a couple of ideas, thoughts. And certainly nothing that I would say is earth-shattering, nor do I think it is necessarily what every approach would be. But I think the purpose for this message is to get your mind thinking about that, about how you are now and how you will be with people who have gone through the worst form of post-traumatic stress disorder that's ever been experienced. Might you begin this process after reaching somebody with a summary of what is the new status quo? You know, you think about it, we have a couple of things to bring up. Revelation 20, verses 1 through 4. Satan has been banished. He's been put in a hole. He's not there to be the agitator anymore, the influencer. Might you say, hey, there's been a few things to change. One, the adversary is no longer here. Two, we have a true change in overall leadership right now. You can reference, obviously, Jesus Christ in Isaiah 9, verse 6 through 7, and 11, verses 6 through 9. How the environment has changed. You know, this person's last particular moment could have been not dying, but passing out. And then the next thing they see is God's government here on earth. Might that be a first opportunity to explain a few things after we've reached them through the compassion and being able to talk? And you know, we've got this whole set of things that we can begin the process after they can reach the point where we can talk about these things and say that many of the problems of the past are now gone because now we have Jesus Christ as the leader. Now we have a group of the first fruits going forward to provide leadership and help. And not only that, but there's been this huge change even in the world and as far as the environment itself. And many things are now different. That's the new status quo. The turmoil, the turbulence, the problems you endured are no longer there. The broken and wasteland of all the nuclear activity and all the ravishing of war that you have seen in your mind, it's now changed. Now, will that happen immediately overnight? I'm not exactly sure. Don't know exactly how long it takes to change all the environment. Could Jesus Christ miraculously make things overnight very different? Possible. But I don't think that this is a situation where you have this kind of conversation immediately. I think you take care of the personal needs of individuals first. Then you start going into this. It's a time process. Might you also bring up the whole concept of a new relationship? Let's turn over to Romans chapter 8. You know, in the list of those post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, an individual doesn't want to involve themselves in a relationship. So you have to gradually work through them and to help to understand that you've been let down tremendously by people. You've seen a lot of devastation and bad things. But now, with this new leadership and power, we want to help to bring you into a loving relationship, not one for which there's been a lot of distrust and anxiety and problems. Verse 15, for you have not received a spirit of slavery, leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by which we call out, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself testifies with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, heirs also, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Of course, the Apostle Paul is talking to the church at Rome in this case, churches of Rome, the house churches. And you see that he's making a comparison even to people enduring the savagery of the Roman government. And we can make an adaptation towards this great love and the desire to build this relationship with these individuals with the family of God. And you're a representative of the family of God to reach out to people, not in the way you do today, but in a far more effective manner, with wisdom, with righteousness, and with the right way of addressing needs of the individuals first, their mental needs, their physical needs. Let's turn over to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4. You know, we've oftentimes made that comment that is oftentimes quoted. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that can be true to a degree on many levels, but I dare say within that first group that comes forward and the first opportunity we have to help people after severely going through the times that they've gone through, man, they don't care about theology at that point. They care first about your concern. And that may be an uphill battle. But here in 1 John chapter 4, verses 18 and 19, for there's no fear in love. And fear is one of those symptoms that kept coming up on people with post-traumatic stress disorder. So we have to teach love and have to be loving beings and to remove that fear. But perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment. And the one who fears is not perfected in love. We love because he loved us. Man, what a profound statement. Maybe that's one of the messages you bring across in that first message is I'm only here because of the great love that was shown to me. You and I may have experienced some things. We may not have experienced the things that these individuals have experienced, but think about the great hope that you're reaching out to as the family of God now. You're reaching out to people. You know, you think about how God has reached out to you and called you in far less dangerous times than what these individuals would have gone through. Has he not been loving and kind and merciful? Maybe he's put some things in your path to help you, to change, to turn, to get your attention. Dare say that he's done anything that has been malicious. And I dare say that he started quoting a lot of doctrine to you immediately. Maybe he reached you through some questions about some doctrine. But we're not talking about you and myself experiencing what these people went through with the post-traumatic stress disorder of the time of Jacob's trouble, the great tribulation, and the wrath of God. You know, our approach is very, very concerning here, I think, and of great concern, I should say, and something that you and I need to be very mindful of. After doing all of this, showing the love, reaching out to the personal needs, might we also introduce Jesus Christ at this point? Again, you may be dealing with people who have no idea about Jesus Christ. No idea. Think about survivors of that 200 men or 200,000 million man army that comes across from Asia, for which Jesus Christ is not even the beginning of an idea in their minds. Turn over to Hebrews chapter 2. It's not going to be people who necessarily have even an idea of who Jesus Christ is. It could be people who have no idea whatsoever. Here in verse 14 of chapter 2, it says, "Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. For assuredly I say to you, give help to angels, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham." You think about that for just a moment, what we're reading. Of course, we're reading here of Jesus, but we're also reading of some things that you and I go through. You wonder why you go through some of the things you go through, why I go through some of the things I go through, and it may result even in the future of our physical deaths and being resurrected as witnesses of God, potentially. Don't get all excited about it, but I mean, at the same time, understand that we go through these things for a purpose and time so that we might be able to relate to other people and help them. He goes on to say in verse 16, "For surely they did not give help to angels, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham," physical people. "Therefore, he had to be made like his brethren in all things, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in all things pertaining to God, to make a propitiation or sacrifice for the sins of the people." That was Jesus Christ. And you and I we need to walk in his steps with the same type of going through these things so that we can be merciful and faithful as a priest at that time. "For since he himself," in verse 18, "was tempted in that which he suffered, he was able to come to the aid of those who were tempted." You know, as a priest, our first and primary focus is coming to the aid of people, not beating them over the head with theology and doctrine, coming to their aid, introducing Jesus Christ, just as Jesus Christ has come forward with us. I hope that these are some things that we should think about when we think about preparing to be a kingdom of priests. It's not only knowing the right thing, but knowing how to approach people. And dare say in the future, it'll be a very difficult task, considering the people and what they've been through. Might we explain how the time to worship in spirit and truth without fear is now? You know, think about what is in Luke 1, verse 74. You see there that Jesus came to serve without fear. We know in John 4, verses 23 through 24, that it states that now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. We think of that now regarding us, you and I. And we think now of how we are to be doing that. Think of that in relationship to providing the atmosphere so that there can be true worship. And you and myself coming to the aid of people so that we can help bring forth Jesus Christ and the Father as representatives of the family of God to individuals who have gone through a lot in that first group. That first message that you give as a servant of God to the individuals that you're coming across, might it also include what we see in John chapter 17, verse 17. If you'll turn there, John 17, verse 17. They have been lied to, been deceived, been totally, either through religious deception or through civil government deception, led to slaughter, physical and emotional, and now the opportunity has been given for you to be the individual, the agent, the representative of the very family of God to begin the process of helping them. And to let them know, as it says in verse 17 of chapter 17 of John, sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. Obviously, the word of God will ultimately have to be one of the things that we have to give to these individuals. But we have to give it in the right way, considering the state of the mind, considering the events that these individuals have gone through, considering their post-traumatic stress disorder, considering all of these things. And so as we go to the Feast of Tabernacles, we listen to a lot of different messages. No doubt there'll be some that you think are better than others. That's great. But understand you can always get something out of everything. And if nothing else, study yourself. Prepare to be that kingdom of priests that are able to provide the compassion of Jesus Christ, to take care of the needs, to bring the aid to people that have gone through a significant amount of trouble. Know your facts, study your word so that you're able to do that, but know that it's not about beating people over the head with doctrine and theology right out the gate as the first message. It's the compassion first, like Jesus saw people who were hungry, who were physically disabled. He felt love for them. As the time goes through, we know the love of many will wax cold. If we are to be a kingdom of priests, that love cannot wax cold in the kingdom of priests.